This is John Reed, and I'm joined by Thomas Wieberneit. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, a bit tired after 2 intense days.
Yeah, we are pretty much seat of the pants recording for y'all on the second full day of ZohoDay. And I will say this, they know how to jam in a lot in a schedule. So now our job is to try to make sense of it. And I don't think we can totally accomplish that, frankly, Thomas, with what we have left in the tank. But I'm always interested to get your first hits.
Uh, well, thanks for the first hits. Yeah.
Yeah, and we have no idea what either one of us thought because
Yeah.
we haven't seen each other yet today really except once. So who knows where this is going to go? But anyway, Thomas, I would just really like to just get your I don't know overall impressions. Obviously, this is a major analyst event. We have a huge contingent that flies in for this. Some of the information's under NDA, but a fair amount of it is not. So, what are your thoughts?
Okay, so for a start, they did an amazing job. I heard some people were complaining about the food, but hell, I'm not here for the food. And it was quite
Right.
okay, by the way, in my eyes, but who am I? More importantly, so there was a real heckload of new information. Some probably expected, some not so, like, well, what Ram presented. So I thought he would talk a little more on well, his AI topic, but he focused on, actually, I don't know whether they are under NDA or not, so but he focused
Yeah,
on,
I can save you the trouble there. Most of that is kind of NDA, but what we can say about it is that it continues Zoho's ambitions towards building a full AI stack.
yeah, not
And
only AI stack, a full stack, so they want to own their destiny.
yeah, but an AI infrastructure stack in particular, obviously it's more than just AI, right? It's everything. But the point being like their views on data privacy, AI context, and sovereignty of data have
Mhm.
kind of pushed them always to build everything, right? And so everything's on the table basically. And last year it was about building their own LLMs, which they've gotten a lot further along as well. But this year, even more. And some of that I'm sure they'll be announcing during the course of the year.
Yeah. So they're making a very compelling case that whatever they are doing there is benefiting them and therefore the customer, which is basically their stance anyways. So that value is the keyword there. And then value was something that really permeated the whole event. How do we provide more value for our customers? That started off with, well, pretty much highly philosophical areas of topics. Then Raju said something like, well, that was Sridhar with the productivity gains are real, but going from digitization via digitalization to commoditizing intelligence means the models, yeah, coming to topics like that it's actually not software that is purchased or subscribed to, licensed, whatever the models will be, but peace of mind. So they are approaching what they are doing every day more from a very positive philosophical angle. And that apparently highly successful. I mean, it's probably that far as we can go. They are growing profitably, growing strongly and quite profitably. So, and this is more than can be said for many other companies that are looking into less of a, say, um, well, altruistic is the wrong word because they are a capitalist company, but into a less of an less ethic ways of achieving the same.
Let me
And
let me clarify something around intelligence as a commodity because I think that was definitely one of the most interesting catchphrases from the show.
yeah,
In my opinion, what they're really talking about there is LLMs as a commodity. And
yeah,
there's a lot of evidence that LLMs are trending toward as a core technical instrument are trending towards commodity, including the way DeepSeek's been able to easily, train up OpenAI equivalent models, or at least something in the ballpark, and open source models and stuff like that. Where I don't think Zoho thinks of intelligence as a commodity is in terms of the way they're trying to apply the sophisticated right sizing of models for different tasks, and incorporation of what they call context, which is a commonly used word right now, but including, the private data of customers down to like role authorization level and everything else.
Yeah.
They don't I don't think they view that as a commodity. They view the overall sort of generation of LLM output as a commodity, and I think they're correct about that. I think one
Yeah.
thing that one really important point that they made is you have to be careful also about losing your intelligence. Like, if you're so, for example, if you're relying upon a big AI vendor and suddenly you have concerns about their data policies or what they're doing in a particular region, then you're cut off from your quote intelligence. And so this whole notion that you could have your intelligence taken away from you is part of what they're talking about too.
Yeah.
Like, they want to set it up for customers so that the customers aren't in that situation. So it's ambitious and interesting.
Actually, they are. I mean, it was a bit sloppy in my formulation. So they are actually advocating putting more intelligence into it beforehand,
Right.
make by making the tools that you use fit for purpose,
Right.
instead of using something that's highly generic and, well, may or may not do the job, which is also, as we all know, meanwhile, pretty inefficient. So, and that's one of the other meanings of context there. So provide the context by what is in the system. Being independent, of course, that was actually something very new from its connotations, from very new, but quite new in its emphasis. Yes, analytics has an on-prem version, but between the lines, one could hear that on-prem is back in general. Or, well, call it local cloud or whatever.
Right.
But that the importance, that the pendulum probably will go back from private and public cloud to, well, very contained clouds, means your own data set at the end of the day.
Yep.
So
The key is going to be to do that without bringing technical debt back, and that's going to be an
mm,
interesting thing.
that,
And
yeah,
and that would be high on my list of their challenges and their strategies. And we can add to that. Uh, that also will factor into their Zoho ERP announcement, which was made before the show, coming out of India, and it's kind of a soft launch phase at the moment. But that's going to be another challenge there, is to provide the customizable modern ERP, but not accumulate technical debt along the way. And we had an interesting discussion with them about that. The one thing I wanted to mention to you that I thought was really interesting was Sridhar Vembu wasn't here. The CEO. He was, well, actually, he switched from CFO to chief uh,
scientist.
research scientist.
Mm,
But basically, I didn't get his job title quite right. But anyway, he's really got passion about the AI coding initiatives, right? And so when he came in on the keynote virtually, he talked with us about that, and talked with us about the level of surprising gains in efficiency that have come up, especially more recently with the new cloud models and stuff like that. And
mm.
that, gave some examples. And so when it came to QA, I asked him, what does this mean for customers? And I got a slightly different answer than I was looking for, but it was interesting because what he said alluded to your point around delivering value. Because he basically said customers should be asking us like for more and for cheaper, and give us even more value. And I thought that was really interesting with the SaaS market in such disarray right now. How many vendors are saying that? I mean,
So
most vendor, right? How many, right? Because most of them are like, oh crap, like we're gonna have to lower our prices, or our margins are getting squeezed or whatever. They're not saying how can we be cheaper and offer even
yeah,
more value. So I
yeah,
thought that was really interesting.
yeah, I mean, they're getting price squeezed anyways. What he also said is, talking about QAing, that proven principles still apply, by means of, you don't use the same model that creates the code for doing the testing or changing the test suite. That's a
Right.
different role. Um, as we had in, or still have, in real life, the guy who is responsible for QA better not be the one who develops it, because then planes are falling out of the sky if Boeing certifies Boeing instead of the FAA, and same applies to software, just with less casualties.
Yeah, maybe not the world's best analogy there, Thomas, in terms of like plane crashes and civilian safety. But no, we get where you're coming from though. But no, I think it's he makes an important point, and in fact, one of the I'm a big fan for the details of AI
Mm,
advancements, and the AI advancements he was referring to go back to his keynote from last year, where he talked about the improvements that have happened since then are not really about scaling these models further. Like Claude Code, for example, it's really what they've been able to do with verifier tools, tool calling to better code compilers, and also, like you said, using different LLMs to quote unquote judge or evaluate output
mm,
and increased inference reasoning and stuff like that. So the point being, like, it really isn't scale that has made this market surge at the moment. In many ways, it borders on neurosymbolic AI principles, the idea of combining probabilistic systems with more
yeah,
verification tools. It's not exactly neurosymbolic AI, but the point is, I think it's a really important distinction to understand how these advances are being made. And at the same time, what Zoho is trying to do is to provide an even deeper level of context and relevance around their AI architecture. And it's going to be really interesting to see how that pans out, because a lot of the customers, and they had a lot of customers here, uh, were not particularly far along yet on that journey. So it'll be interesting to see how that
yeah.
works.
That's the next thing of this conference: the availability not only of executives but also of customers, and partly even of critical customers. Yesterday at dinner, I sat next to a customer who came in here with the mindset of being on the verge of defecting to the competition. And that has a couple of quite astonishing, repercussions. First of all, this guy got invited at all. You don't see that everywhere. Uh, Actually,
Well, let me figure it out.
the first time I really see that happening. And from a Zoho perspective, I mean, this guy was allowed to unsupervisedly talk to, well, in the shark pond, yeah, with us.
Yeah.
And also the other thing is, and this shows the success of the strategy. Day one, what he got told on the presentations by Mani, by Ram, by Vijay, by Raju, convinced him to stay. And that shows that it is a very good strategy to constructively work with critical people, to get them back to, well, where there is a mutually beneficial relationship. Here it worked. And it's just amazing. It's just amazing.
Did interview a customer on stage, New Cross Healthcare, and they were able to shed light on their use of Zia across different areas, like a number of CRM, sales and service use cases, and some in the context of healthcare as well.
Mm.
But even then, showing some care in terms of what they would use, uh, agentic AI or whatever you want to call it today, generative AI for, versus areas where they would be more careful. For example, you know, prescribing things that have real medical implication for patients, for example. And I personally find it really reassuring to talk with customers who were early adopters, but still asking careful questions,
And
and not just going in and saying, "Oh, this is going to solve all of this." Because I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of customers out there whose executive teams think they can just plug this in and get miracles.
mm,
But it's really nice to hear practitioners using Zoho technology and saying, we trust that this is different than what we could get out of just working with a freestanding large language model out of the box. but we're also really applying it carefully. And I don't know that every customer is going to go about it that way, but it's cool to hear customers talk openly about that and thoughtfully.
He also quite openly talked about the force reduction or the manpower reduction in his development team, about which I'd like to inquire him by, well, basically turning around his words in his own mouth. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
90%, come on. That's, how bad have you been before? That's
Right.
the
Yeah.
connotation of it. So if digitalizing your development processes gives that much of a performance gain, and he added on that, well, the rest of the people, the remainder of the people, is still 40% more productive than the whole gang before, then something else was wrong. And I'd like to dig a little deeper in and to understand a little better what actually happened there, because these numbers are too good to be true, or too good to be attributed to just one single thing. This is
Potentially the case, right? I mean,
yeah,
and that's one thing about these events is that, there it's rarely a chance to do like a really deep dive into
yeah,
one particular situation. And so you're always left with more questions. And in general, my observation about these technologies is they tend to have, if they're applied properly, they tend to have modest benefits alongside other forms of benefit, right? So
yeah.
a lot of times you've already had some form of deterministic automation that's helped some, and then you add another form of agentic automation or assistance that adds some more benefit. The key though is that while it might be modest, it's repeatable, like that you can then apply it to other related adjacent areas. And talking with Ron this evening, who heads up Zoho AI, he's talking about that internally at Zoho. Like they have to do a little trial and error around honing the use case
Mhm.
and and finding exactly the best combination of technologies to improve the process and fix the bottlenecks. And it's
Mhm.
always a little bit different than what you would have expected, but it does get a result. And I think that's what I think is so interesting about Zoho is that they're not under the quarterly market pressure of a lot of SaaS companies right
Mhm.
now. And so they can play the long game and say, well, these are great benefits for
Mhm.
customers. And even if we're not making a fortune of money on this right now, it's going to add up as more customers apply this technology in sensible ways that help. And so, hopefully their customers will do the same thing, right? And like you said, not have too good to be true experiences, but have gradually better experiences
Mhm.
uh, that is not just about AI. It's about getting your decision making right, getting your analytics right.
Mhm.
Integrating disparate platforms. Building custom applications, finding a partner that you trust if you want that. Like, there's a whole bunch of pieces to
Yeah.
this. It's not, and anyway, it's interesting because sometimes we get into one technology at the expense of the overall play. And
Yeah.
for Zoho, it's about moving from an apps company into an apps/platform company in terms of its customers. I think it always thought of itself as a platform internally, but now it's got to be like that for customers too.
Yeah, they're talking about themselves as a tech company for quite some time already. So not as an enterprise software
Yeah.
app company. So that jives. And to me, I mean, I'm a sweet guy. The putting whatever you have onto one platform, one stack makes sense, makes total sense, because and this is where I think the healthcare company, some of the healthcare companies' benefits come from as well. So there's far less integration penalties. So you need far less skills. You can, as a lot of the things are already pre-integrated, harness that, work on the back of that. So I guess there are a good number of things that just added up for them in order to help them that much. So I don't have any doubt about the numbers. So there, why should I?
Right.
Well, it would be interesting to get more of that story, really, and with the efficiencies and, let's say, value topic, which is also another topic of Zoho for quite some time. I'd like to see how they, especially for the mid-size, but later on also for the enterprise markets, go on with, well, what still is wrongly called time to value, means the implementation period. Because right now, if I'm looking at the Zoho One, that comes at a price tag that is phenomenal. So I mean, there's nothing, especially if you're taking the all-in, the employee version, then I mean, there's nothing that can really compete with it. Now, if you take on the implementation cost, which still come at sizable hourly numbers and numbers of hours, then this whole advantage that you have from, well, this incredibly low price of the software is gone for the next 3 to 5 years, actually. So there's a diminished benefit from that. So what I'd like to see soon is for them a toolkit, call it toolkit, but just generally, that enables far shorter implementation cycles. You use the LLM technology that is there. So they have it for coding. Why not for configurations? Dump in your specification sheet, given that it's specific enough and it needs to be fairly specific as you're normally outsourcing it anyways. Dump it into the system, have Zia mull around it, or OpenAI or Claude or whomever, mull around it, and all of a sudden you got a couple of configurations and the code that you need. And that at a fraction of the time, and hence a fraction of the cost.
Well, we do need to wrap in a sec because I'm basically on fumes. But I was going to ask you what you thought a good challenge for Zoho for this year was, but I think you've actually answered that question. I'm going to add on to it a little bit. I think Zoho is quite interesting because they have an international SMB footprint, but then they also have enterprise ambitions. And with the ERP announcement, one thing that's interesting is how many companies are running at scale using some aspects of what you might call ERP. A lot of large Indian companies, for example, in particular. So they've proven already they can run things like accounts payable, receivable, whatever, at a massive scale. But in terms of the enterprise thing, I think enterprise customers are diverse and have a range of applications, and more emphasis, I think, on integration is going to be important. More emphasis on Zoho playing nice with other platforms and apps when necessary is going to be important as well. So I think more talk on that will be important if they want. When you think about enterprise credibility, I think part of it is playing nice with others. Now, granted, there's a lot of enterprise vendors that you and I could name that don't do a very good job of that either. So this is not something
Really?
that's easy for enterprise vendors to do, but the reality is that customers always, even if they choose you as their go-to platform, they always want to tie in some other stuff, at least for a period of time, or they go with you, but then they get acquired and there's another piece that they have to deal with. And so it happens, right? So I think there's more for Zoho to do there, but man, there's a lot to process for this event. I feel like we only touched on a handful of things, and Zoho does have a bunch of announcements that they're working on pertaining to things like data lake and things that will allow them to integrate more data sources and non-Zoho data. So I expect we will hear more about that this year.
Oh yeah. Well, just coming out of these CX and developers sessions, there's a heck of a lot of stuff to come. The pipeline is full.
All right. Well, to be continued. And by the way, they do have a user conference coming up in May. I'm not sure if I will be there. Show conflicts and all of that have to be juggled, as we always do, Thomas. But the point is, that comes up in May, and so I think we can look ahead to some major announcements then, as Zoho keeps us running around trying to make sense of what they're doing. But that's a good thing. So
Yeah, and mostly it makes sense.
yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely.
They're doing a good job at it. But it's
All right. Let's
alrighty.
leave it there, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, and see you soon.
Sounds good. See you in a few weeks.